So it turns out the pollsters aren't exactly being honest in regards to Kamala Harris's poll numbers. You guys gotta check this out.
Here to dive into the numbers and let all the candidates do the talking, because words talk, but numbers scream, and we've got the numbers. I'm Tom Ellsworth, the Biz Doc.
I'm Amy Dangerfield. Let's go ahead and dive into this week's headlines. Trump has now experienced his second assassination attempt on his life. This time it was in Florida at the golf course. We're still learning more information about this, so we will continue to provide updates. But as Trump is dodging bullets, Kamala continues to dodge interviews, and we can see
Indeed she does.
And we can see that Pennsylvania voters are now apparently wondering if she can deliver on her promises. And then finally, Reuters actually conducted a survey coming out of the debate to determine where are independents moving, where are they looking to cast their vote after seeing the debate. And turns out a lot of people were not really convinced with Kamala's performance, despite many people saying that she won.
Very interesting indeed to have those undecideds and independents separate from the debate in these focus groups conducted by reputable news agencies, some that lean left in an unreputable way, but nonetheless coming out and saying, wow, the perception is that maybe she won, in quotation marks. However, when it came down to issues that matter to the only voters that matter, which is the independents and the undecided, they were breaking for Trump, and we're going to tell you why in just a moment. So let's talk about the polls that come out there. We've mentioned to you that some polls are better than others. Some polls are spun with great aplomb by the polling managers and the people that own those polls. This is a list of the pollsters, the major ones, from the 2020 election. And this is the average difference between the actual election results when all the votes were counted and the last poll or two that they submitted to the public, that they released along with their narrative and their crosstabs and everything else in the week prior to the election. So what was the last thing you said and what really happened? Let's compare. Isn't it interesting? This company called Atlas Intel was number one. We're going to talk about them in just a minute, but let's go down to the bottom. Quinnipiac University, CNN, the Los Angeles Times. Wow, isn't that interesting? Some of the most major news media that are out there were the worst. And we are talking 2.01 rating, 8.45, 4 times different than the better pollsters.
And the funny thing about that is that CNN and all these reputable news organizations, they have the most resources to deploy accurate and fair polling, but it just seems they don't want accurate but it just seems that's not what their goal is. Their goal is to implant an agenda, to prop up Kamala Harris, to make it seem like she's doing better than she is. And that way, when election day swings around, people won't be that surprised if Kamala is doing well as a result of some funny business, if you know what I mean.
Over the top with streaming. They're coming at you through a YouTube channel. That are coming at you through their tweets as well as through their traditional cable and satellite. They are out there attempting to sway opinion with their headlines. And so it's so interesting to me to see the ones that were here and to see Trafalgar, Atlas, Inside Advantage, and Rasmussen, who takes a lot of grief and a lot of people poke at it. But the founder, Mr. Rasmussen, may be said to be a conservative Republican in terms of his personal political feelings and positions. Doesn't matter. It appears that he's trying to manage a wonderful polling organization that gets as close to net truth, meaning compare last poll to the actual results of elections here. And so it's very interesting to me to see these well-known names, especially top news agencies, toward the bottom in terms of credibility. All I got to say is words talk, numbers scream, and this is screaming at us saying that who's running the poll is more important than the talking head that's spouting it. Now let's look at a special group of pollsters.
And we are all very much cut from the same cloth. These are the pollsters who are putting out the objective information regardless of, their political affiliations, their political leanings. They are committed to putting the truth out there and performing their quantitative analysis so that they can inform you, the voter, about the true state of the race. And who are some of these pollsters, Tom?
Well, in addition to us here at the Decision 2024, brought to you by Valuetainment, here we have three. Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen reports that they were kicked out of the 538 poll, yet he does a little analysis here talking about why they have over 1 million Americans in their poll. They have Trump +2, and then 538 had Harris +6, and he's giving the exact kind of information that we think is highly credible and stands the test of time and ends up being true. Then there's Rich Barris, the People's Pundits. He has a wealth of information, and he talks in detail about polling biases and when the registered voter, or even better, likely voter polls were pulled and what the mix is, as well as how they're being spun. He's very, very insightful and right to the point, especially when he's upset. Here's one from this weekend. How on earth is Minnesota only 4 points if Harris has a 5-point national lead? See his point there, saying one doesn't match with the other, and it wouldn't. Well, that would be because she doesn't have a national lead, and both sides internally know it. Would be nice to have just one election without the nonsense. This is the kind of thing that people respect from Rich Barris.
If you remember correctly, back in 2020, Rich Barris was on the money. He was the best pollster in America. I was watching it live on Bannon's War Room. He would tell you exactly what would happen, and it happened to a T. Of course, that wasn't until 4:30 in the morning when things went awry, but you can't hold that against the guy. So when the news organizations tell you the polls, you have to say who is the one administering the polls. Because simply, not every poll is created evenly. So I'm trusting independent pollsters instead of listening to CNN and whatever the news is purporting, because they don't have your best interest in mind. They're just trying to manipulate you.
Out the same bias that are here and pointing out how polls are being used to astroturf certain points. We believe these three and us, we call ourselves the resistance, fighting against spun polls to bring you, the American people, the objective reality to the polls as they are today.
So speaking of objectivity, we're going to dive into Atlas Intel right now. As you saw on our second slide, these were the #1 accurate pollsters going back to the 2020 election. So this is a trusted source, and we want to dive into their data on the current national polls. Now, this really stirred up some controversy in the world of polling because it is in contrast to many liberal narratives that are taking place right now. What can we see when we take a look at Atlas Intel's national poll? Trump is polling at 50.9% by comparison to Kamala Harris's 47.3. This is congruent with what we've seen with Rasmussen. This is congruent with what we've been reporting on the last several weeks. And so it's nice to see the #1 objective pollster echoing these same sentiments that we've been talking about, Tom. So going back to the headlines that we mentioned, Reuters has stated that the independent groups are now breaking for Trump, and we can see that evidenced inside of this polling. It's evidence inside of the 3.6 difference that we see there between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. The independents are coming home, they're making up their mind, and it looks like they are leaning Trump.
So you had people arguing of who won the debate, then the focus groups such as Reuters and doing independent interviews finding out that people were breaking for Trump on the economy, and then where are they? They're right here, and the lead increases for Trump. It's science, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't matter who won if the independents and the undecideds decided and they moved toward Trump on the economy, and that's what the numbers are screaming.
So now we dive into the top voter issues, and once again, this was conducted in the same poll by Atlas Intel, and we can see once again, as we've done deep dives week to week to week, many of the same concerns and top voter issues are echoed here in the top 3. We can see that inflation and cost of living, so the prices of everything's going up, people not being able to afford their bills. Followed closely second to that is the economy and the job market. The Dems report that the job market is better than ever, omitting the fact that these are just jobs that are recreated after COVID, and the everyday person is still feeling this issue. The heat index is very high. After that, we have immigration. Immigration was one of the #1 issues on many of the states that we did a deep dive into. This is right on people's front yards. We've all heard the stories. Currently, what's going down in Springfield and many other places around the United States, People are being affected by this. Now, we can see underneath that challenges to reproductive rights. This is obviously Kamala Harris's wheelhouse. This is what she's based pretty much her entire campaign on. But compared to the top two issues, we can see it's tracking at about 50% of the importance of the weight is being placed on women's reproductive rights. And then finally, underneath that, it's worth bringing up safeguarding democracy. And this one is a little bit ironic considering their candidate did not go through the democratic process in order to be elected in the first place. A little ironic.
Oh, snap. The numbers speak what's on the mind of the American people. And what's so interesting is you see 55%, 55%, 50%. This is over half of the voters that were in the Atlas Intel survey. Is reflecting the same things that Reuters saw. So why is it such a surprise that so many people are in denial about that Trump is extending a national lead on national polls? It's not a surprise. It's math.
So we promised you that we would revisit Pennsylvania to see the way not only the DNC may have impacted polling, but also the recent presidential debate that took place. However, what's interesting, Tom, there have not been any national polls from major pollsters released since that debate took place. I wonder why that could be.
It's not a surprise, especially when you consider that those polls may not be matching the narrative that the mainstream media wants to push. So when CNN doesn't release a new poll around Pennsylvania, you know, the wonderfully ranked polling engine that is CNN, you don't have anything to release on Pennsylvania. And what you see here in the recent ones, 2 Trump, 1 Trump, 2 Trump, we are seeing Pennsylvania right now, VT Analytics, at approximately 3 points for Trump. Maybe that's why those polls aren't being released. And that mismatch with the narrative pushed by the mainstream media is a problem for them when they see it as their duty to get one candidate elected over the other. And so when you see Trump here and you see things moving, you don't see new polls, it's probably because the new polls are saying the, quote,
for all of the previous data, plus our own aggregate through VT Analytics to bring you our call 7 weeks from the election. Tom, what are we seeing?
So here we go. With 7 weeks to go, we believe there's a 74% chance of a Trump victory, holding at 287 electoral votes. That's at least 287. Here's why. Let's run through the battleground states. We just told you that VT Analytics, we've got Pennsylvania at approximately 3 points for Trump. We also have Georgia starting to extend a little bit, but it's still very tight, as well as it's tight in Arizona. But Nevada, darker red for a reason. It's because we're seeing Nevada, maybe it's no tax on tips, maybe it's no tax on overtime, or maybe it's just more people concerned about immigration, which is a big concern, especially in the Las Vegas area with homelessness and many other things that are going on that are attributed to immigration. And that's what those voters are concerned about. Regardless, we see it as 287. Now, what's very interesting, I want to point something out. Future math, future truth. If you take away Pennsylvania, this becomes 268, too short of the 270 needed. But by next election in 2028, you know what will happen? You could subtract Pennsylvania from here, and if a Republican candidate was holding what you see here without, they would win 273. Why? Electoral votes are going to be moving from places like California to places like Texas, from New York, from Illinois to places like Florida. So that's a blue to red move. There are some electoral votes that will be moving from red to red as America moves toward the Sun Belt. Suffice to say, the results of all of that will be that in the future, it's more important than ever to win the Sun Belt. And you're sitting here today concerned about Pennsylvania. That might not even matter. You could give away the blue wall and win as a conservative Republican in 2028.
I don't even want to talk about giving up Pennsylvania. I want Trump to take all these freaking states. New York, California. I know it's going to be a stretch, but I don't want to rule any state out. Trump's a competitor. He's going to fight to the very end on each one of these states. So I understand what he's saying, that eventually these like swing states aren't going to matter as much, but they're still going to matter. You can't leave any stone left unturned. You have to go through all the preparation. You have to do all the right things, which is exactly what Trump is doing. Taking no breaks whatsoever. He's on a mission to save America.
At least 287, 74%. And places like New Hampshire and Virginia narrowing. We covered Virginia last week, talked about that narrowing. Do we see it going? Maybe, maybe not. But the fact that it's narrowing at all causes alarm with Kamala Harris's camp and causing them to spend money and make visits to places like New Hampshire and Virginia.
So as we continue to follow these pollsters, such as Atlas Intel, we're going to be paying close attention to determine where are the closest margins, where is the race the tightest, where is that occurring, and we're going to surprise you with a deep dive into that particular state.
The states that are absolutely pivotal for Trump to win if he wants to win this election: Arizona, he's got to win that, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and even Ohio. Those 4 states, if Trump could win 3 out of those 4, I think he's got this no problem. Forget that, actually. I want Trump taking all 50. I know that's a long shot. I know it's probably never going to happen again in American politics. But I'm a Mets fan, and their slogan is, you gotta believe. I don't want to count anything out, because at this state in America, people are just fed up with politics in general. Our bank accounts are shrinking. Our debts are growing. The cost of groceries is exponentially rising. We cannot sustain this path. And people have just had enough. We gotta put Donald Trump back in office. The only president to lose money while in office. He's actually working for the betterment of us. So we need to rally behind this man. Our country is at stake. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down below. What states do you think Donald Trump must get if he wants to get 270 and enter the Oval Office once more? Let me know the must-know states down below. I'd love to hear that. And if you enjoyed, make sure to smash that like, comment, subscribe, and wish you guys nothing but the best. Till next time.